February 1945, Camp Swift, Texas. The bus doors opened with a metallic groan, and 23 German women stepped into a world that seemed almost unreal. Dust swirled around their boots, catching in hair and hems. The sun struck like a hammer, thick, relentless, different from European winter cold. Nurses, radio operators, a dentist, all gaunt, filthy, eyes wide with suspicion. Greta Hoffman, 23, stood at the back. Her spine was rigid, a relic of years of field nursing, her hands gripping her uniform straps as if holding herself upright would make the heat and fear less dangerous. Beside her, Liesel, a 19-year-old girl whose nervous energy had kept them both alive on the transport, kept talking, words spilling like nervous sparks. They had been told what awaited them: cruel Americans, starvation, theft. They had been told nothing but lies about mercy. And yet, as the mess hall doors swung open, they were hit with a smell that made their stomachs twist in disbelief. Roasted chicken, soft bread, coffee, real coffee, cutting through the dust and despair. Greta froze. Liza laughed, a short, sharp, almost hysterical sound, and others joined. It had to be a trick. Food like this did not exist, not in Hamburg, not in Berlin, not anywhere but memory. The women hesitated. Helen Morris, the American officer in charge, gestured efficiently for them to enter. Her uniform crisp, her face neutral, her brown eyes assessing without cruelty. No words of comfort, no threats, simply eat. Greta's hands shook as she took the first bite. The bread was soft, the butter melted into it. Chicken, tender and seasoned, seemed almost obscene in its normalcy. She ate until she was full. It was an act that should have been simple, but felt like defiance. That night, as the barracks settled into a fragile quiet, Greta overheard two guards outside. "Bergen, Belsen, da," one muttered. "And these are the people we feed 3 square meals a day?" The words rose in her chest like smoke, twisting something that had felt like relief into shame. The first taste of mercy felt like accusation. The journey to Texas. The Atlantic crossing had blurred time and space. Days, nights, or something between had passed in the rocking metal belly of the transport ship. Waves smashed against the hull, carrying the smell of salt and sickness. Sleep had been impossible. Every cough, every shout, every creak of metal reminded them that they were prisoners, no matter what the American uniforms promised. On the train ride from port to Camp Swift, the women had huddled together. Anna, the dentist, had stared silently out the window, counting nothing. Margrethe whispered about the bread that never came, the milk that spoiled, the nurses who had died quietly in field hospitals. Liesel kept talking. Greta had only listened, letting the words fill the air without engaging. Each had a private story, a private horror. Greta had tended to soldiers she couldn't save. Liesel had watched friends vanish on the Eastern Front. Some of the women had seen massacres. All had survived, some only by convincing themselves that cruelty was normal, necessary, inevitable. Mess hall. First meal expanded. The long tables stretched before them, the weight of silverware, plates, cups, a luxury unimaginable. Greta's stomach clenched at the sight. Laughter bubbled nervously, breaking the tension, but it sounded alien and fragile. Rosa, the cook, older, round-faced, flour on her hands, watched the women like she was witnessing something miraculous. Helen remained behind her clipboard, a shadow of authority without a single unkind gesture. No words of comfort, no threats, simply eat. Greta's hands shook as she took the first bite. The bread was soft, the butter melted into it. Chicken, tender and seasoned, seemed almost obscene in its normalcy. She ate until she was full. It was an act that should have been simple, but felt like defiance. That night, as the barracks settled into a fragile quiet, Greta overheard two guards outside. Stories about deferences. Nothing like we get to see. Nothing like Helen. Edge, brand new root beer. Nothing like mercy. The words rose in her chest like smoke, twisting something that had felt like relief into shame. The first taste of mercy felt like accusation. Monday, morning chores. Dawn came slowly over Camp Swift, spilling light across the barracks in muted shades of orange and dust. Greta, still hollow from the weight of the first day's revelation, rose mechanically. The mattress beneath her felt impossibly soft, the sheets strange against her skin. Outside, the younger women whispered and shuffled, still unable to reconcile the absurdity of clean beds, warm food, and safety. Roll call was routine but exacting. Names were read aloud, one by one, and Greta's response, quiet, flat, was automatic. Any hesitation drew a glance from Helen, whose posture suggested she expected nothing less than compliance, but understood everything beyond the words. As the sun climbed, heat thickening the air, women were assigned chores, laundry, garden work, kitchen duties, and infirmary rotation. Greta found herself in the infirmary, where the smell of antiseptic was sharp, clean, and vaguely alien. Here the wounded were minor cases, sprains, heat rash, mild infections. No screams of agony, no blood-soaked floors, just order, control. A world where a wound could heal, not where every touch reminded her of death. Rosa, the cook, moved through the kitchen with a quiet authority. She didn't speak English perfectly, but she didn't need to. Her gestures, her patience, the rhythm of kneading dough or chopping vegetables communicated more than words could. Greta shadowed her at first, then gradually took on tasks, measuring, rolling, folding. Flour dusted her arms, and for the first time in months, a small sense of satisfaction rooted itself in her chest. "See, Greta," she said, guiding Greta's hands, "biscuits are gentle. You fold, not smash. You ask them to rise, not demand." The absurdity of learning to fold dough while the world outside was still in chaos didn't escape Greta. Yet the act itself became meditation, a tiny rebellion against despair. The garden. Liesl, meanwhile, had discovered the garden plot. At first, assigned begrudgingly, she quickly transformed it into a sanctuary. Her hands moved carefully through soil, planting seeds, watering tender sprouts. The quiet concentration was unlike anything she'd known in the chaos of war, a world where destruction was fast and relentless. Here, she nurtured life. Greta would sometimes watch her from the infirmary window, noticing subtle shifts, the lines of tension easing from her shoulders, her breathing slowing, a faint light returning to her eyes. It was impossible not to notice the contrast with the barracks, where despair often clawed back into the faces of the others. Letters arrived with relentless regularity, each a reminder of the outside world and its relentless progression. Greta's sister's handwriting brought both comfort and grief. Hamburg is rubble, their mother gone. Each word was factual, clinical, yet layered with the unspoken. They survived, they endured. Greta held the letters against her chest, absorbing their cold truths, then tucked them under her pillow. They were proof, not consolation. Liesl, on the contrary, refused letters. She shoved the Red Cross packet under her bunk, untouched, a silent protest against connection, against the reminder that life continued elsewhere. The barracks were wise of how messy taste, but Helen's walk spoke differently. A knowing, a silent proclamation that life was different now. Strictness, compliance, yet no gesture of unkindness. Small gestures, words, yet nothing of ease. As the first weeks tested, fractures appeared. Some women looked at Liesl and only saw joy. Others saw her energy as a threat. One woman tossed a cup and stormed out. Hopelessness, desperation. Greta had only said nothing, yet she knew. Action was easier than thinking, easier to do than to feel. She thought back to when she had been in field nursing. This was a world where a wound could heal, not where every touch reminded her of death. She looked out at the garden. There, Liesl tended her plants. She had found a place of life, a place to nurture life. She thought back to when she had received her sister's letter. Hamburg, rubble, mother, dead. She held the letter against her chest, but then tucked it under her pillow, just to keep it. In the evening, she heard two guards outside. They were talking about referring people to the officer in charge, Helen. She thought about how this was a world where she could heal from the stress, a world where
April 1945, Camp Swift, Texas. Spring had finally arrived. Wildflowers, bluebonnets, Indian paintbrush, tiny marigolds pushed stubbornly through the red Texas dirt, stubborn against the sun and wind alike. Greta stood in the infirmary doorway, watching the women work in the garden. Liesl's hands moved with a quiet precision, arranging seedlings, watering rows, tending life like it was sacred. The act was small, almost trivial, yet monumental to a group of women whose past had been defined by destruction. The camp itself hummed with routine: roll calls, chores, kitchen rotations, infirmary duties, garden work, all carefully measured, all designed to maintain order. But beneath the surface, the tension remained. Some women avoided meals entirely. Others snapped at guards or each other over imagined slights. It was as if every small kindness, the biscuits, the clean beds, the books, were accusations of survival, reminding them of what they had seen, done, or ignored in the war. Greta had learned to move through it all quietly. She handled minor injuries, organized supplies, and offered assistance where she could. Yet every small act, every careful motion carried the weight of guilt and the burden of memory. The newsreel. One Sunday, the camp chaplain arranged a gathering in the mess hall. Music played softly at first, then a short sermon about mercy, resilience, and rebuilding. The German women were invited. Some donned their cleanest uniforms. Greta braided her hair, a ritual of order, of control over a world that had been chaotic for so long. Then the lights dimmed. The projector rattled to life. What was meant to be uplifting footage of war's end turned into something unbearable. Bergen, Belsen, Dachau, Buchenwald, names the guards had whispered months ago, flickered on the screen. Mountains of bodies, hollow-eyed children, mass graves, guards arrested in crisp uniforms. Greta's stomach twisted. Each uniform was familiar. Each face could have been someone she passed in a hallway, saluted in obedience, smiled at unknowingly. Liesl erupted, shouting, "Lies! American lies!" Her voice cracked, fractured around the edges. But Greta saw the terror in her eyes, the recognition of truth she could no longer deny. Others wept quietly, mouths pressed into fists. Some vomited. The noise filled the hall, a chorus of despair. Helen watched from the back, her hands folded, heart aching. She had seen many horrors, but witnessing these women confront complicity, denial, and grief all at once was something different. She followed Liesl when the girl bolted outside, falling to her knees in the dirt, sobbing. Helen didn't touch her. She didn't need to. Witnessing someone's breaking could be the only gift a human could offer.